Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope we're all well. Thank you very much for tuning in. This video is the 5th in our Aerosoft CRJ tutorial series, following volume 3 of the documentation supplied with the add-on. In this video we are going to do our preparations for our descent and then commence our descent and initial approach into Munich. You join me here in the cabin, just enjoy my sandwiches. However, we do have some work to do. So let's jump into the cockpit and start getting on with things. Okay, so we're cruising along at flight level 180 here. We're at 300 knots. Everything is looking good. What I'd recommend you doing at this point of the flight is just hitting escape on your keyboard and just taking a breather. And there's a couple of pages here to read in the manual. So I'd recommend just having a quick read of page 62 and 63. There's a lot of text on there, and it will just familiarize yourself with the procedure we're going to use for the descent. So have a quick read through of those two, and then join me back on the flight deck. So, although we've got a little bit of time to go until we arrive in Munich, we might as well start getting prepared now. Obviously, because this may be the first time you've used this aircraft, so it's helpful just to give yourself a little bit of extra time. Okay, so first of all, we want to just calculate the top of our descent. And you can do this using the rule of thumb on page 62. Essentially, you are multiplying your altitude minus the zeros by 3 and then adding 10. So in this instance, that will give us 64. And what we could do, we could set up a little reminder for ourselves using the FMS. We'll go to a fixed page, enter in Echo Delta Delta Mike, which is Munich. And then we'll enter 64 into the distance cross section. If you then go to the MFD and zoom out, you'll see a ring appears now around Munich, which is our reminder for our top of descent. We can also go to the MFD menu and open the VNAV window, and that will now show us the VNAV section. So you'll see on here our descent into Renlo. We need to meet the restriction of flight level 130 or below. You can actually see, if you look closely here, if I just clear off the airport's altitude and speed here, you can actually see our top of descent calculated by the VNAV in the aircraft. It's fairly close to the ring that we just put in there. So we're looking pretty good. Okay, and another little reminder we can put in for ourselves is another one of these rings. So we'll go to the next page and put in Munich again. And this time we are going to put in a reminder for when we want to be reaching about 10,000 feet. So we could do this by timesing 10 by 3, and we're going to end up with 30. We'll put this in the same box as well, and this is going to give us another ring around Munich where we can expect to reach 10,000 feet. And again, we're just going to use that as a little reminder to make sure we are on profile. However, we will be following VNAV down as well, so we'll have multiple different reminders for us on the way down. Okay, so as I say, we've got a little time to go until we start our descent, but let's start the descent checklist just to make sure we're ahead of the curve a little bit here. I'm going to bring up the direct to page as well using this direct button here, and we're going to need that as we start our descent. Alright, so descent checklist. Let's make sure first our landing elevation is set. We're going to set this to 1,500 feet for Munich. So as we did before we took off, we're going to just pop this out using the right Alt key. We'll go to the overhead panel and we'll just increase the landing elevation. That's increasing here to 1,500 feet. Okay, great stuff. We can close that off now. We'll then just double check that no lights are on here on the fuel pump section, and the override button is back to auto. We shall go down also to our radio tuning panel. We'll make sure the TCAS is set to below, not above. We'll just leave it on below, and that'll be perfect for the descent. You probably wouldn't do it this early on a real flight, but because obviously we are doing a tutorial flight, we know we're not going to come across any other aircraft, so we'll do it now just to save us a bit of work later on. Again, the next checklist, the next item on the checklist is the radar. And as explained earlier on, this is not simulated at the moment in this add-on, so we're going to leave that alone, as well as the terrain display. We'll check the ICAS and just make sure there are no further messages, and there are none, so we are good. We'll need to also tune the ILS frequency for Munich. So we can either do that using the FMS or through the RTU panel. We'll do it through the RTU panel this time. And let's select here and set this to 109.5. There we go. It does state in the manual to set the course to 080 degrees. However, in my experience, the course is set automatically when it's picked up as a ILS frequency, so you don't need to worry about this, and that's okay. We'll also tune the DME as noted in the manual. We're going to do the same thing as we did earlier on. We'll tune it on this side to 116.00. And we'll just swap this into the active and press DME hold, and then we'll swap back the ILS frequency so we have both. Okay, we are looking good. Just taking a quick check on our speeds. We're a little bit quick, but nothing too drastic. Just a slight reduction in the thrust. Should keep us on around 300. Another thing to make a good habit in this aircraft as well is just to keep centering the heading bug every time you take a turn. And if you ever need to go to heading mode, that's going to come in very useful for you. Okay, next we'll want to just review our landing performance data. So we'll go over to the performance page and check the landing speeds in the bottom right here, and just simply press set all. We will leave VREF alone for now. This set all button will only set the V2 go around speed and VFTO. These are now set on our PFD, but obviously they are below the current speed tape, so we can't see them. Okay, so next of all, we would normally do our approach briefing. We would bring up the chart and just review how we are going to do our descent, what restrictions we expect to make, and anything else that is worth noting on the descent. But we're not using charts for this tutorial flight, so we are going to skip that section. So that is everything for the descent checklist. We can't really do anything else now until we start our descent. So we're just going to enjoy the cruise for a little while here, and I will join you as we reach our top of descent. Okay then, so you join me here just before we reach our top of descent. As you can see, our radius ring has now come into view, and you can see top of descent indicated on our track. So what we're going to want to pay attention to as we begin our descent here in vertical speed mode is we want to have a look at our direct to page. This is going to show us the descent path angle that we'll need to take. At the moment it's saying 0.9, 2 degrees, 1.7, etc. And this will start to increase to 3 degrees as we set in our VNAV page as we get close to top of descent. You can also see here a number with an arrow next to it. This arrow, well, this number indicates the vertical speed required if we wanted to descend to that waypoint at that flight level from our current position. So again, these numbers will all start to increase as we get closer to our top of descent so that we can execute a 3-degree descent. So as we are getting very close now, we've got only 2 minutes to go. We're going to set our altitude down to 10,000 feet. We will arm the vertical speed mode, and we'll make sure that's set to 0 for now. And my apologies, earlier on I had noted this was the top of descent indication. It is in fact not. It is. The top of descent is showing at the top here. As we've just passed through it, let's start our descent. We want to keep up a descent rate of around 2,100 feet initially. And my apologies, I've just wound that the wrong way. I will need to wind this down to... We'll wind this down to 2.4 now. So, what we can see now on the PFD is a few things that indicate that we are on the right path. Remember to bring the throttles back as we start our descent. We are going to gain speed quite quickly here, as you can see. So make sure we're pulling those back. Now, as you can see, there is what's referred to as the snowflake here on the PFD. That is basically indicating if we're on the correct vertical profile, which we are. So that's good. You can also see on the vertical speed indicator which vertical speed is required to stay on the profile. And as you can see, we are right on it, so we are looking good. We're slowing down now to about 290 knots, which is going to be our speed for the descent. So we'll set that, and we'll just make sure we can try and keep that up. It looks like we're still losing a little bit of speed here, so I'm going to put the power back in a little bit. And just make sure we don't lose too much speed here. There we go. I think that should do it. So, as we've just previously done in this video, we've already done our descent checklist, so we don't actually need to worry about that for now. So you can just keep an eye on your speed and the vertical profile, making sure you try and keep to that as best as possible here. Doesn't matter too much if you deviate in this instance. Obviously it's just tutorial, we're just practicing here. Okay, so as we pass through Renlo now, you can see we've dipped below the profile as we require a slightly lower descent rate. So let's lower that now to... We're going to lower that to 1.5, which is 1,500 feet per minute. Now we're approaching 10,000 feet. Let's pull the throttles all the way back to idle, as we'll now want to slow down to 250 feet. 250 knots, sorry. And we'll wind the altitude down further to 5,000 feet. The aircraft has captured the altitude here and it is going to start leveling off, so it'll be quite easy for us to lose speed. And we'll, as soon as we get to 250 knots, let's keep on descending. We're going to set this to 1,300 feet initially and make sure you keep an eye on the speed. We shall now turn the landing lights on as well as the taxi lights as we now come below 10,000 feet. It would probably be an idea now to just make sure that the seatbelt signs are indeed on. And we are going to get ready now for the approach. Okay, so we are a little bit below the profile, so I'm going to reduce our vertical speed a little bit. And you may notice as well, just as we pass through our other green ring, we reach 10,000 feet. So everything is looking good. You can see the white snowflake now coming into the center again. And everything should be good. So we're gaining speed again here. We want to make sure we start thinking about slowing down now. As we approach our final approach fixes, I am going to just pull the throttles right back. And what we want to be aiming for at this stage is round about 210 knots. So we'll reduce our speed down to 210. Like so. And just keeping an eye on that vertical profile as well. Just reducing that a slight bit. We want to check our altimeters are set. So we've been cleared down to an altitude. So we can actually set our altimeter to the correct setting, which is 1012 in this case. And we are running through our approach checklist now. So if you look on page 67 of the manual, there is a good diagram in there that gives you a rough idea of what you could follow for an approach. And we're looking pretty good. We're still slowing down and we are reaching DM431 in 6 miles, which is where we want to be about 210 knots. It's okay if you're a bit slower a bit earlier or a little bit later. We do have a level section to fly following DM431 at 5,000 feet to Magat, which is where we will intercept the ILS. You can also see we have this blue needle that's appeared now, which is an indicator for the localizer. You can see the distance to the runway, as well as term, which indicates we are in the terminal area. Okay, so now we are at 210 knots. We can go to flaps 1. And the chord sound indicates we're about to level off. So make sure you keep your eye on your speed here. And we're going to just run through the before landing checklist, just to keep ourselves ahead of the curve once again. We'll also get flaps 8 out now as we start to slow down to 190 knots. Okay, and we are at 190 knots now. Let's get flaps 20 out. So looking at our before landing checklist, our flight attendants are advised. The signs are already on. The thrust reversers, we can get armed as well. The landing gear shall come down momentarily, and we'll set our flaps as we get a bit lower down. Okay, so we are coming up to aligning on to the ILS now. I was going to cut the video here, but we might as well just carry on. I think it's going to be quite awkward for me to reset everything before we commence the final approach. I'm just noticing here our speed has dropped pretty drastically here after putting out flaps 20. So you want to keep an eye on that, and we'll maybe just zoom in the map a little bit more here. So make sure you keep an eye on your speed here as you're approaching the ILS. It is quite important to make sure you have a good attitude with your aircraft and a good speed. So that's something that you may run into. Just be very, very careful with your speed as you're extending the flaps. I'm obviously presenting a video to you here, so I'm going to excuse myself because I'm not paying full attention here. But we want to make sure that we are about 180 knots as we intercept the ILS here. So you can see the blue diamond coming down for the ILS. So we shall go ahead and hit the approach mode button. We'll put our speed to 180. And you can see on the PFD here we've got localizer 1, which is captured, and glide slope, which is also captured. So we'll start descending on down the ILS now. Any second. So just get ready with those thrust levers. There we go. There's the nose going down. So we want to pull back the thrust levers so we don't gain too much speed here on the descent. Okay, and I'm going to pull the thrust levers right back now so we can slow down further for the approach. We'll set our VREF speed, which is 129 knots, so that's where we need to be slowing down to at this point. Slowing down quite nicely. We can set the next stage of flaps now. And you'll probably find as you put these last 2 stages of flaps out, you will need to put quite a bit of power back in so that the speed doesn't drop too quickly. At this point you would also set the go-around altitude. Now we're not going to deal with go-arounds in this tutorial. I will do a completely separate video for the go-arounds at a later date. Okay, now we want to get our final stage of flaps out. This is going to produce a lot of drag. As you can see, the speed drops pretty drastically. So you want to get ready to put in your thrust levers very rapidly there. Okay, so the radio altimeter is now alive. About 2,000 feet above ground level. We should probably deploy our landing gear. So let's do that now. As you can see, the landing gear is now deploying. We're at flaps 45 and we are fully configured for the landing. Reversers are armed as well. We're at our VREF speed, which is looking good. We are on the glide slope and on the localizer. We need to set our minimums as well. Probably should have done this a touch earlier. However, let's get that set in by pressing this knob here. And we want to turn that to MDA and press this down again. And the decision height is, let me just check that. The MDA is going to be 1670, which we are just 1,000 feet above. There we go, 1670 is set, and we'll just twist this over back to decision height and just turn that off. There we go. So we've got a minimum decision altitude set. Let's keep an eye on our speed here. We are going a touch slower here. Let's make sure we put our power back in. 1,000 feet radio altimeter call out is checked. And we are ready to land. Okay, so just checking up above, making sure all our lights are on as they should be. Passenger seatbelt signs are on and everything is good to go. .8 miles to go to runway 08 left. Radio altimeter is reading 500 feet. Let's disengage the autopilot now and fly the rest manually.
400.
You will need to trim quite regularly to get it to keep the descent path angle going.
200.
And we're a little bit low now, but we are looking good. Just looking straight forwards into the touchdown zone.
100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
There we go, and we're down. Slowly lower that nose and thrust reverses. And we'll add in some braking as well. Stowing the reverses at 60 knots. And there we go. We are down. Not too bad of a touchdown there. Okay, so we're going to leave at this high-speed exit here.
Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop. Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop.
Okay, so we're going to come to a complete stop here on this taxiway. We're going to end the video here and we'll do a separate video for the taxi in and shutdown. But we are going to break down to a complete stop there. activate our parking brake, and that's going to be it for this video. So I hope you guys have enjoyed. Let me know what you thought in the description. Let me know what you thought by hitting the thumbs up or thumbs down rather. The playlist for this full tutorial series is in the description or in the top right of the video. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.